Welcome to the Near Northwest Management District first virtual plant sale, benefiting the White Oak Butterfly Garden at the White Oak Conference Center. I am Heidi Sheesley with one of my sidekicks, Little Lucky, owner of Treesearch Farms. We specialize in growing unusual trees and shrubs, natives, perennials, especially hummingbird and butterfly plants, and then gingers and citrus and fruit trees and etc. and etc. A lot of unusual plants. I hope you enjoy the program. Okay, here we have the blue lip shrub or shrubby perennial. It's a wonderful, unique plant that fills out averaging 3 feet, maybe 4 feet, if you allow it to get that big. And it's covered in these clusters of blue lip looking flowers. And it blooms for a very long time during parts of spring, summer, and fall. It likes a little shade in the summertime. It doesn't like being in full, hot, blazing sun. It's been evergreen for us in mild winters, but a hard freeze can freeze back and should come back from the roots. And it's also a great plant for insects, butterflies, and such. Here we have our wonderful native red Turk's cap. This is a very tough, shrubby perennial that can average easily 4 feet by 4 feet, but can be kept pruned. It prefers growing in part shade, but will grow well in sun. It's a heavy bloomer in cycles, spring, summer, and fall. These wonderful red flowers, and a major, major hummingbird plant for your garden. Here it is under bur oak. And, as I said, hummingbirds and butterflies love the native red Turk's cap. Very long-lived plant. Okay, the lemon sorbet shrimp plant. Shrimp plants are very, very tough, old-fashioned plants. This is a particularly incredible plant. The shrimp plants, this one can get up to 4 feet tall, very full, and blooms these magnificent, soft, butter yellow. Well, the calyxes are butter yellow, and then the white flowers coming out of them. But this blooms about 11 months out of the year. It'll grow in full sun or part shade, and very rarely has it ever frozen back. You can just, it's hard to prune it because it's always blooming, but if you want to keep the size down, you can easily prune it. Now, the variegated red shrimp plant is another tough, wonderful perennial with variegated foliage, sort of green, cream, and white foliage, and these shrimp-looking flowers, the actual little flowers, the white flower coming out of the red calyx. And this is, again, a magnificent plant, very long-lived, and a great pollinator for full sun or part shade. Now we go into porterweeds. Porterweeds are a phenomenal plant for your hummingbirds, butterflies, bees. It prefers part shade, but will take full sun. And this one is a new one called Nectar Wand Red. And the flower color in this is actually a richer, darker coral than what's being shown in the picture. This plant can easily get up to 4 feet tall, but you can prune it any time and it'll just come back thicker and fuller and right back into bloom. And as I said, butterflies and hummingbirds, and the color is much richer and darker actually than the picture shows. But look at this. You plant this in your garden, you will be guaranteed butterflies and hummingbirds. Now we're going into another native perennial, the penstemons. Penstemons are a wonderful evergreen perennial. They form sort of a nice, like a mound of spinach in the wintertime, just a nice low evergreen mound of foliage. Then the Gulf Coast penstemon starts blooming in, mid-spring, normally April, and the flower stalks can easily get 2 2 feet, 2.5 feet tall, and covered in these tubular, beautiful, dark violet, not quite purple flowers. And bees and hummingbirds and butterflies absolutely adore this plant. It's tough, it's native, it likes a little shade, but it'll grow just as well in full sun. It clumps out, and it can reseed. I let it come up anywhere it wants because it's so beautiful when it blooms in the spring. Now this one's really exciting. The blackbeard penstemon is not really a hybrid, but a selection of our native Penstemon digitalis. The native white one has green foliage and white flowers. This blackbeard has beautiful dark green and burgundy foliage, and then the flowers come up pink and then sort of fade to white. Again, this is an evergreen rosette in the wintertime, does prefer some shade in the summer, and blooms in the spring, and slowly clumps out each year, and the clump gets fuller and fuller. These are plants that have been in the garden for us for years. This one is new in the trade and really, really exciting. Okay, in the wintertime, after this last freeze, a lot of things froze back. There are not many perennials that are evergreen. Dianthus are an evergreen perennial that love the winter, hate our summers, hate our hot, humid summers. First Love is one of the very few dianthus that performs well all year round. It, again, is an evergreen, nice, full clumping plant that blooms about 11 months out of the year. It really prefers some shade in the summertime. Is really important to keep it looking nice and clean. After a heavy bloom set and it's finishing its bloom, just prune just above the foliage, all the old stems, and it'll come right back into bloom. A wonderful, beautiful plant. Now, there are all kinds of pentas on the market, a lot of hybrid ones. One of the problems with the hybrids, they don't have a lot of nectar. And pentas are a major, major plant for nectar, for hummingbirds, butterflies, bees, and other pollinating insects. This pink remembrance is unique because it's a bolder looking plant, larger leaves, larger heads of pink flowers, and these pictures don't do it justice. The flowers are a little darker pink than what's in the slide, but a very wonderful new penta that we're excited about. Now, skullcaps, there are many kinds of scutellarias. The red fountain, the fountain skullcaps, are low-mounting perennials with a glossy, tropical-looking foliage, but it's very tough. It's root-hardy in most winters, normally goes dormant and comes back in the spring. A lot of our winters, mine has not gone dormant in my front yard. Now, red fountain has these clusters of tubular red flowers, or red, such a dark pink it's almost red. The clusters can be up to 3 inches tall, and again, great for your hummingbirds, bees, and butterflies. And these prefer a little afternoon shade in our summers. And then there's the fuchsia fountain skullcap. This is in my front yard. I don't have a blade of lawn or blade of grass. Everything is raised beds with perennials and plants for the butterflies, birds, and for my neighbors to enjoy. But you can see the growth habit, sort of a nice mounding habit. Also, both these varieties are great in containers, cascading over the side. They're repeat bloomers. They'll keep blooming over and over. You can always give them a little haircut, and they'll come right back into full bloom. Okay, now we go into lilies. My grandmother in Canada, I fell in love with tiger lilies up there. Turned out they don't work worth a darn down here. you'd have to treat them like an annual. They would survive and bloom one time and then they die. Well, the trade, these fabulous growers and hybridizers have created hybrid Asiatic lilies that perform beautifully down in the Gulf Coast area and multiply and come back year after year. They are absolutely stunning. They start blooming mid-spring, and there are many, many colors. I'm going to just run through some of these. After they're finished, you can always cut the stalks back, but they will multiply, come back year after year in full sun or light shade. This American Dream is a beautiful sort of a cream and pinkish red. Then there's American Treasure. These are all pictures taken in our garden. This one has been coming back for years. And then American Revolution. And then there's Zambesi. This is a different kind of hybrid. I didn't expect it to come back. It is so gorgeous. The white, the thick substance to the petals. And I just thought, this is too good to be true. It's not going to perform like the others. This has been coming back in our garden, and I couldn't be happier because it's such a stunning, stunning lily in the garden. And again, these well, this one prefers a little shade in the summertime. Okay, crinum lilies. Crinum lilies are one of the toughest plants you could have in your garden. They're a beautiful lily with long strap-like green foliage. They're clump forming. It's a bulb. And the bulbs get quite large as the plant gets older each year. The plant slowly multiplies. But this Shrek is a variety that starts blooming in the spring, late spring, and it'll bloom in the summer. Very long bloom time with these beautiful sort of stars and stripes or red striped white petals. And they also are great nectar plants for the butterflies. But here's a bouquet of them in the garden. But Shrek is very long-lived. You can dig them and divide them if you want to share with your neighbors. Full sun, part shade, very, very tough plant. Now, another extremely tough plant are the spider lilies, the Hymenocalis. This is a picture taken in a little farm town in Mexico where they hadn't had rain for over 3 months. This is an old spider lily that was under a shade tree, but just to show how tough they are. But what we have available is Riparia, which is a really attractive one, very narrow, dark green foliage, very attractive foliage. And then they bloom. They bloom these beautiful, sort of a daffodil-shaped cup with these spidery petals coming off of it. Now, Riparia is a mid-late summer bloomer. And when they come into bloom, it's a mass of color. And again, butterflies. Now, these plants go dormant, and the crinums go dormant. So they'll go dormant in the wintertime, and then they come back up in the spring, and they multiply well. Again, another tough plant that daylilies, everyone seems to know daylilies, I would expect. But there are good ones and there are bad ones. This is one of the finest landscape daylilies I have ever come across. We started growing it 30 years ago. Then people weren't into daylilies, so we just kept stock. But Yellow Landscape Supreme is an evergreen plant. It's an evergreen daylily. Slowly clumps out. But what makes it so superb, one of the many reasons, very, very long bloomer, very thick substance to the petals, beautiful yellow flower. And then look at the mass in our landscape. Just spectacular. And blooms and blooms. Then, if you're going to divide a daylily, you want to divide it the opposite season that it blooms. So it blooms through the summer. We like to divide them in the fall. So you can dig them and divide them share them with neighbors, or replant more in your garden. But just to show you how magnificent these are in the garden, people drive into our entrance and their jaw drops when they see these in the garden. Okay, now another wonderful native are the Louisiana iris. There are many varieties of Louisiana iris, many colors. And one thing with Louisiana iris, you have sort of an early season bloomer, mid-season, and late. So early would be mid-late March. April is the month for Louisiana iris to bloom. And then early May, you'll have some late bloomers that bloom. You also have different heights of Louisiana iris. So if you want to design your garden with different colors and heights and bloom times, where you have lower blooming ones in front, but then you can stagger to where some varieties start blooming in April or in March. Then a whole bunch of them bloom in April, and then a few in May. Now, black gamecock is a short one, about 24 inches, the foliage. And it's a beautiful, beautiful blue-black. It almost looks more royal purple. It's such a mix of these colors. And that yellow signal, that little bit of a yellow signal, makes everything else pop out color-wise. But Louisiana iris are tough. They grow beautifully in gardens and garden beds and flower beds, but they need shade in the summer. They grow through the winter. They're evergreen. And they like moist. They'll grow in water, but you have to know when to plant them. Okay, now another wonderful native are the Louisiana iris. There are many varieties of Louisiana iris, many colors. And one thing with Louisiana iris, you have sort of an early season bloomer, mid-season, and late. So early would be mid-late March. April is the month for Louisiana iris to bloom. And then early May, you'll have some late bloomers that bloom. You also have different heights of Louisiana iris. So if you want to design your garden with different colors and heights and bloom times, where you have lower blooming ones in front, but then you can stagger to where some varieties start blooming in April or in March. Then a whole bunch of them bloom in April, and then a few in May. But once you get them going, they just slowly multiply, and they're just magnificent. So this is black gamecock, and it's a late bloomer, and black gamecock's short. So you'd want to put it in front of the others, and it'll bloom later. So here's a stand of it in our landscape. And again, your butterflies and bees enjoy your iris. This beautiful iris is Marie Caillé, named after a very famous Louisiana woman and her knowledge of iris and her hybridizing of iris. And this one is a taller one, about at least 35 inches tall. When I say tall, it's the flower stalk. And iris have lots of what they call scapes, or lots of buds on a stalk. So one flower opens, and then the next day another one opens. So over a period of time, they keep opening on the stalk. She is a mid to late season, so she'd be blooming April into early May. And she's a beautiful sort of a dark blue violet. It's hard to show the proper colors on slides, but a gorgeous iris in the garden. Then there's Wine Country. Wine Country is another medium tall one, 30 inches, 34 inches, but it's a rich, deep burgundy wine red. And again, it has that wonderful yellow, thin yellow signal that really makes all the color pop out. And it's a mid-season, so Wine Country's normally going to be blooming in April. Then we have Violet. It's just a gorgeous flower, pretty much mid-season. And this one, the color is really pops out in the garden. And the signals here are more of a yellow, wide yellow signal on it. But this is violet. So we're just showing there are many varieties of iris, but we're only doing 4 because it's too complicated to do too many with this particular sale that we're doing. Okay, now going into butterfly plants, for this one in particular, the Mexican butterfly weed. This is an absolute must if you are into monarch butterflies. This is the host plant. The Asclepias family, the butterfly weed family, is the host plant for the monarch butterfly caterpillar. So the butterflies look for this plant, not just for the nectar for the butterfly, but they lay their eggs on this plant so that they can reproduce. And this will grow in full sun, part shade, repeat bloomer. Cut it back anytime you want, especially after a bloom cycle, unless you want to collect seed. And it comes back fuller, thicker, and right back into bloom. Here are the caterpillars of the monarch butterfly. You want to do not spray these plants. They will get aphids, but the aphids are specifically for this plant. It's not really going to hurt it because the aphids bring in the ladybugs, which are beneficial. But the caterpillars will eat every bit of this plant. And then they'll go off and form chrysalis, and within 2 weeks you have a new monarch butterfly. Monarch in this case is on the left and looks like a viceroy butterfly on the right. Now, purple coneflowers. We grow a specific native purple coneflower to Texas, and it is an extraordinary perennial. Our plants in the landscape start blooming normally in February. They form these rosettes, and the rosettes slowly sort of clump out each year. They bloom all through the summer. You can see a cluster there. Just mass plantings. You will bring in butterflies, bees, just amazing amount of nectar off these flowers. But this likes full sun, and we're really, really pleased to have this particular native one available. Now, rock rose, Pavonia, is another native perennial. It's sort of a shrubby look. It can easily be 3 feet by 3 feet. You can keep it pruned. It likes sun. It'll take part shade. And all of these like just a well-watered but well-drained beds. Nothing really likes sitting wet except Louisiana iris. But this is a beautiful, it's in the hibiscus family. The flower is about 2 inches across. Repeat bloomer. And as you can see, butterflies. And here it is in our garden with the white gara that you're going to see soon. And again, the white gara is native. So it's a great combination to have. Both the Pavonia, just a beautiful plant. After a heavy bloom cycle, you can give it a little haircut. It's going to come back very full, right back into bloom. Now here is the gara. This is, without a doubt, one of the most fabulous native perennials. It's native out in the fields going down to Galveston or east of Houston, west of Houston, out in sort of the prairies. It's a clump-forming perennial that produces long, slender stems covered with butterfly-shaped white flowers. They literally look like they're just hovering over the bed. And it comes now in different colors, like pinks, mostly pinks or white. But this is one, it will go dormant in the wintertime, but it repeat blooms. Again, after a heavy bloom cycle, you can prune it back and it comes back thicker and right back into bloom. But this, combined with the pink Pavonia, combined with the cone flowers, all of these go so well together in your garden. You do that, you'll have every butterfly in the county in your garden, along with bees and many other great pollinating insects. And another one to add to the collection, the yarrows. The yarrows were evergreen this winter, this unbelievably cold freeze that we had. They got nipped a little, but feathery green foliage, very soft feathery green foliage. There are many types of yarrows. This is paprika, as you can see the color. You can also see how soft and feathery the foliage is. And another wonderful butterfly bee pollinator. And it prefers full sun, and again goes very well in combo with all those other plants. You can see it repeat blooms again after a heavy bloom cycle. Give it a haircut, it comes right back into bloom. And their clump form, well, actually this one very slowly colonizes. Okay, what we're going to do are one vine and one rose. This is by far what we consider the finest passion vine, pura vida. And it's a lot more, it's much more well-mannered compared to some passion vines. It has beautiful foliage, quite unique glossy foliage. These flowers are gorgeous. It's a repeat bloomer. And I have found that if you allow it to go up and then cascade down, it blooms its heaviest on the stems that are trailing down. So here's just mass planting of these. Now the passion vine is very important because it's a fritillary butterfly. We should have put a picture in. So like your butterfly weed for the monarch, you want passion vines as the host plant for the Gulf fritillary butterfly. This will freeze down and normally come back in the winter. Or you can keep it in a big container with a trellis. Very easy to grow in containers and trellis them. So that's Pura Vida passion vine. Okay, for the ultimate rose, climbing rose, the Peggy Martin rose. She survived a hurricane and floods and salt water in Louisiana, and tough, magnificent rose, a spring bloomer mainly. She'll bloom a little later, again a little later, but you have to train her up and she cascades down. She's about to come into bloom soon. She has these clusters of pink flowers, almost thornless. And here it is on our front fence. And this was used, he created out West Columbia on a ranch, created a 2-car carport with cattle panel. And he planted the Peggy Martin and it grew over and created a roof of roses for the carport. Here's a little arbor at the nursery. So this is all Peggy Martin rose. This is over in sort of the Tanglewood area of Houston. Instead of having a hedge of shrubs, we suggested they put in Peggy Martin rose. So you can imagine when people are walking their dogs or biking, they just stop and gawk at this magnificent rose on their wrought iron fence. And I hope you enjoyed the presentation. This is Trooper saying, what? And Max is saying, okay, thank you so much for listening. And now you can buy plants. Hope you enjoyed the talk.